Thank you, Jeff. I want to thank, first of all, Jeff Lurie and Susan Lee for inviting me here tonight, and also the Bethlehem Public Library for hosting this event, and to you for being here. Thank you so much. This topic concerns property relations that reach back to the first contact between indigenous peoples and Europeans. The lands I discuss are the traditional homelands of the Mexicanog, Haudenosaunee, and Chattako communities. Many of their descendants are members of the Mohican Stockbridge-Munsee Band and the Iroquois Confederacy of Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora nations. I wish to show respect to all indigenous peoples of this region, past and present. It's widely claimed that the anti-rent movement was filled with music. No one used to know very much about what that music was. Living memory had virtually disappeared by the mid-20th century. Journalist Henry Christman, who interviewed descendants for his monumental chronicle, Horns and Calico, said that his informants could only piece together with bit-by-bit recollection the songs and ballads of the anti-renters, songs familiar to many ears when they were young. Christman included many poems in his book, but indicated very few tunes. The only song that endured until Old Songs mounted the show, Down with the Rent, about 10 years ago. Some of you might remember that. Until Old Songs' recent revival of some of the repertory. Until that time, the only song that really circulated was the ballad Big Bill Snyder. We'll be listening to some of that soon. First, some context about the movement, whose legacy has been preserved in place names, institutions, legal arrangements, and popular lore across the region. Traces are everywhere once you know what to look for. Some may recollect that the anti-renters made an appearance in Howard Zinn's book, A People's History of the United States, where he describes them as resisting the last vestige of feudalism, a holdover from colonial times, when New York was, to quote Howard Zinn, like a feudal kingdom. In the early 17th century, Dutch West India Company co-founder Kilian van Rensselaer was granted a vast tract of land spanning both sides of the Hudson River by the Dutch Republic. The patroon system of perpetual fiefs Kilian designed persisted through the British political takeover of 1664, transforming its patriarchs into manor lords. 2 million acres were soon controlled by about 20 interrelated families, including the Van Rensselaers, Schuylers, and Livingstons. The American Revolution did little to change this. Although hereditary titles were effectively abolished by the new state constitutions, and veterans were well rewarded for their loyalty in land grants under Hamilton. New York's great family maintain multiple, married to Schuyler, whose sister, or Peggy, the third's wife. This novel financial instrument was a continuation of colonial leases called indenture, specifying annual payment of rent, wheat, fowl, and labor. The farm families were also responsible for taxes, while farmers to sell their lease one lord. They worked. Upstate farmers were renters whose possessions could also be sold off for non-payment, a legal action called distress. Their situation contrasted starkly with that of Yankee farmers who were outright owners of the land they cultivated. By the 1840s, more than 250,000 people, approximately 1/12 of New York State's population, lived under the patroon system. Stephen Van Rensselaer III claimed upwards of 750,000 acres, or about 1,200 square miles. For nearly 50 years, the good patroon had collected annual tribute from his Rensselaerwick tenants, exerting considerable influence on state politics and becoming one of the richest men in America. His manor house is depicted in David Lithgow's mural, reproduced on my book's cover. The work, titled An Incident of Anti-Rentism, was created on the UAlbany campus in the 1930s. David Lithgow specified the year as 1838. The picture may seem idyllic, but the tenant's appearance at the front door is audacious. This was the moment before the storm. It was Stephen III's death the following year that sparked several decades of protest and civil disobedience. According to historian Reeve Houston, the anti-rent movement was the largest and most sustained farmers' movement in American history prior to the Civil War. Anti-rentism has much in common with other major 19th reform movements: abolition, women's rights, and temperance, including an overlapping story of song. They also shared an approach to music making that involved writing new lyrics to well-known tunes of the day, a practice called borrowing or making contrafacta. So we're going to listen to one of these now, Bill Snyder, a humorous ballad set to the tune Old Dan Tucker. It tells the story of a dissolute deputy who the tenant farmers resisted early in the conflict. It's sung here by Pete Seeger and Ed Renahan. It was recorded in the mid-1970s and is, as far as I know, the only anti-rent song that ever was recorded professionally. So let's try this.
Shining silver bright, the sheriff came in the dead of night. High on a hill was an Indian true, and on his horn a blast he blew. Get out the way, Big Bill Snyder, we'll tar your coat and feather your hide, sir. Get out the way, Big Bill Snyder, we'll tar your coat and feather your hide, sir. The Indians gathered out the sound. Bill cocked his pistol, looked around. Their painted faces by the moon, he saw and heard that same old tune. Get out the way, Big Bill Snyder, we'll tar your coat and feather your hide, sir. Get out the way, Big Bill Snyder, we'll tar your coat and feather your hide, sir.
Okay. It's a close-up, a detail of that same broadside. The tune here may have its origins in African folk song. However, it was first published by the legendary blackface minstrel Dan Decatur Emmett in 1843. Emmett was also the first to publish The Boatman's Dance, which became another anti-rent contrafactor. He was, and you may know him as the... Now, Bill Snyder was one of many songs used at the annual 4th of July celebrations, where spirits were rallied for the anti-rent cause. It was sung by the band, Learville, and the broadside was sold for the benefit of the band. The occasion for the ballad was an incident in September 1841 near Rensselaerville, the culmination of the Albany County deputy's relentless enforcement of the Rensselaers' property claim. Renters in so-called calico Indian disguise managed to isolate Bill Snyder, threatening and humiliating him before he was allowed to run off. Snyder did not arrive back in the city of Albany until the next day, leading some to assume he was dead. Actually, he was very much alive, but the encounter concluded his pursuit of the Helderberg farmers. The story, however, electrified the town, and the Ballad of Bill Snyder became the movement's best-known song. It was even quoted in Anya Seton's novel Dragonwyck a century later. Bill Snyder's lyrics describe two of the movement's most important symbols, the Calico Indians and the tin horns, sounded by tenant farmers when the landlord's agents or law officers were on their way. So that high on a hill sat an Indian true, and on his horn this blast he blew. Keep out the way, Big Bill Snyder. Now, the Calico Indians were so named for the cotton cloth they used for their disguises. A few months before the confrontation with Bill Snyder, tenants and their supporters began hiding their identity behind homemade masks and gowns. A mural depicting their terrifying outfits has been displayed at the Delhi Post Office in Delaware County since the 1940s, when the anti-rent centennial was commemorated there. And here you can see on the right a detail of a tin horn, the second symbol of the movement, normally used to call folks for dinner. The farmers sounded them to signal neighbors across great distances that support was needed to forestall the authorities serving papers or writs, demanding back rent or notice of distress sales or eviction even. The practice began in autumn 1839 with the first confrontations in the Helderberg Hills. In fact, tin horn was incorporated into the only known instrumental composition associated with the anti-rent conflict, an anonymous piano piece that appeared the following year, titled The Helderberg Quick Step. Now, this anonymous piano piece was published in New York City, actually, excuse me, in 1840, a year before the incident with Bill Snyder. It was probably written by Troy composer and music dealer John Andrews. And you may be interested to know that his music store was in the Cannon Building in downtown Troy, which is still standing. John Andrews was the Troy Corps that's mentioned there, one of several military companies ordered to the Helderbergs or Helderbergs during the anti-rent confrontation of December 1839. Now, overall, this piece is just a conventional number in C major in 2/4, march time. It's a quick step. What makes it distinctive is its tin horn obligato. The composer, I could show you that. Sorry, let's go back. Okay. The composer might have chosen military bugle for this passage instead, but the incorporation of tin horn acknowledges and prioritizes the tenant's cause. It sounds in the third section designated the gathering. After two heralding blasts on a single tone, and these were not pitched instruments, minor from a forms a two-bar response by the piano. And I have a recording that made of this. Let's go back. Sorry, played before. Let's try to get to it now. Okay, let's try it this way. That tin horn was found at historic Eastfield, where they do have a couple of tin horns in their collections, and my husband played it out there. He's an old trombone player, and then we stitched together the piano part with the tin horn. In fact, it's hard to know how widely this piece was actually played, the Haldebarra Quick Step, how it was disseminated, or the social settings where it was performed. But this instrumental work preserves, through aesthetic means, significant oral symbolization of topical events. Okay, now that we've heard two songs, I want to pause to say that my book includes transcriptions from broadsides and newspapers of lyrics for 22 songs, plus 7 poems that have musical associations but no specific tune named. Who knows, maybe we'll find those someday. The 22 specific settings involve 16 different tunes. For example, Old Dan Tucker was used for 3 songs, and Robert Burns' Scotswood Hay, or also known as Bruce's Address, was the basis for 5. Other tunes were drawn from theater, from hymnody, and other vernacular and traditional genres. More songs could be out there, but I decided to stop at 30. That is 29 songs and the 1 instrumental number. Now, this leads me to what's probably obvious by now, which is that my book addresses many different forms of anti-rent expressive culture, including visual and literary. These works provide insight into the music and vice versa. Furthermore, I've cast a wide net in order to include musical and other works inspired by the movement, whether they take a down-rent or up-rent position. And I follow anti-rent expressive culture into the 21st century, beginning and ending with what was my inspiration, Old Song's wonderful theatrical production, Down with the Rent. In between, I discuss paintings and music commissioned by the Van Rensselaers, novels that reflected on the conflict, such as James Fenimore Cooper's Little Page trilogy, and Herman Melville's Pierre, and Seaton's Dragonwyck. But also the centennial commemorations in Andes and Camp Woodland, and regional school and community theater productions. So now let's turn back to the central years of the anti-rent conflict, which were 1839 to 1846. As I said, Stephen Van Rensselaer III died in 1839. He had been known as the good patroon for, among other reasons, not pursuing rent payments when times were tough. And they were tough, especially after the financial panics of 1819 and 1837. In fact, the good patroon himself was $400,000 in debt when he died. His heirs decided to pay this debt by collecting back rents from the farmers, the same ones who thought their debts had been forgiven. Now, the expanse of land known as Rensselaerwyck was divided neatly into east and west manors by the Hudson River. And good patroon's sons, William and Stephen, each stood to inherit one side, the east and west manors. Stephen took action first, posting notices demanding back rent throughout Albany County. His tenants sent representatives to negotiate, but they were rebuffed at the West Manor House. This led the farmers to write their own Declaration of Independence on the 4th of July and declare a rent strike. In response, Stephen IV asked law enforcement to start serving papers. Confrontations that autumn led to intervention by Governor William Henry Seward. And this is when the movement's first expressive works appeared. Actually in the New York Herald, whose extensive coverage of the conflict mocked both sides. A lengthy humorous song was followed by several satirical border ballads based on selection from Walter Scott's minstrelsy of the Scottish border. So now what I want to do is I want to give you a short sampler, okay, of live songs. And I've realized when I was giving a talk in Andes last month, Is this, it's on, isn't it? Okay, great. Okay, good. Okay, so. Okay. Oh, that's bad. Okay. Let's get that back in there. Come on.
You want some help?
I should be able to do this. I'm just getting the position. There we go. There we go. That should be okay. Yeah, there we go. Oh, this is just the tension on the cable. Okay. So. All right. So. Okay. So the first of these songs, as you can see, The Rout of Reedsville, set to True Thomas. And this ballad was also, this tune rather, was also from Walter Scott's Minstrelsy of the Scottish Border, and was later included in Francis Child's collection of ballads, Child Ballad 37. Now, I have to explain this a little bit, what this satire is. First of all, the Dutch were what the New York City people called pretty much everybody upstate, but it's basically the farmers are called Dutch here. And in several verses, which we're not going to hear, this is a much longer song, as you can imagine, but in several verses, there's Dutch dialect, so they're thoroughly mocked. At the same time, there's several political figures named, also mocked. So Prince John and William Marcy decided to join in on the side of law and law and order and the patroons. John was John Van Buren, the president's son, Martin Van Buren's son. He was called Prince John by the papers prior to this because he had gone over to England for Queen Victoria's inauguration and he danced with the Queen. So he was ever after known as Prince John. He later became Attorney General of New York State. William Marcy, the former governor, had again also joined in, and they apparently some pants got torn and needed to be fixed, and anyway, you'll hear that. Small Potatoes was a nickname for William Henry Seward, so it was a way to mock him, but it was the Seward that needed to be called in. Okay.
Nancy?
Yes.
Where's Reedsville?
Pardon?
Where is Reedsville?
It's in between here and Rensselaersville. I went to look for it. It's a little hard to locate these days, but
Aston, you go up Aston Road before you come back out on the main road, you'll come to Reedsville.
thank you. Yeah, and Clark's Ale House got a lot of business during this conflict. The correspondent for the New York Herald talks about being there and talking to people. So at Clark's Ale, okay, so here it is. On Reedsville Hill a fray began, at Clark's Ale House it ended. The Dutch out o'er the soldiers ran, so merrily they bended. The sheriff from the city came, with young Prince John came he. The young, the old, the blind, the lame, they bore good company. The Dutchman dared them all to shoot, and threatened them to kill. They ran and stopped but at the foot of Helderbarrock Hill. And there Prince John did take a drink, and Marcy he drank too, and said, "Good troth, I truly think we'll never reach Westerloo. 2 small potatoes we will send for troops these Dutch to fight, and then I will my breeches mend and sleep away the night. Now let us all for Prince John pray, and Marcy long live he, although they had the worst that day with that Dutch company." Okay. So good that this has straps. Okay. Now, oops, here goes. After the confrontation quieted down, Governor Seward charged the legislature with investigating the situation. While the State Commission deliberated, the rent strike and the patroons' insistence on payment continued. Tin Horns and the Calico Indians were regularly called to action in clashes with law enforcement. By 1842, Rensselaerwick tenants had become allied with farmers in neighboring Schoharie County. The anti-rent movement's first newspaper, the Helderberg Advocate, circulated for about 2 years until a court case brought by the Livingstons forced its suspension. Nevertheless, this publication showed the farmers and their supporters the value of having a formal outlet for their ideas. That outlet appeared in New York City, where the National Reform Association was organized in early 1844. The brainchild of George Henry Evans, the National Reform Association's objective was to improve the situation of the laboring poor by halting land speculation and promoting small-scale ownership. The National Reform Association created an alliance with the anti-renters upstate through Thomas De Vere, a recent immigrant from Ireland and former Chartist leader. The National Reform Association's weekly, called The Working Man's Advocate, published poetry and song lyrics expressing the common interests of urban and rural laborers. And one of these was the Agrarian Ball, set to the tune Rosin the Bow. That was a wildly popular comic song, first published in 1838. No composer is named. Today it's known as Acres of Clams, and a variant of it is Down in the Willow Garden. That's not how it sounds here, but it's a variant. It was also used as a Whig campaign song, and the image here of a ball that keeps going, whose momentum won't stop, became a very important Whig slogan. Whoops. Sorry. Come all you true friends of the nation, attend to humanity's call. Come aid in your country's salvation and roll on the agrarian ball. And roll on the agrarian ball, and roll on the agrarian ball. Come aid in your country's salvation and roll on the agrarian ball. Now, the Working Man's Advocate soon changed its name to Young America to better represent the National Reform Association's objectives, which are now understood by historians as leading to the Homestead Act of 1862. But meanwhile, the anti-renters encountered severe legal setbacks from the state legislature and the courts. The latter's affirmation of the sanctity of contracts, which of course included leases, repeatedly limited the tenants to private settlement with the landlords. In response to the legal system's intransigence, the movement spread to 8 additional counties. Aspirations were articulated and sung at 4th of July gatherings, as seen in Big Bill Snyder, but also this next song, We Are True Anti-Renters. I've got the tune for this as designated on the broadside, is Teetotalers Are Coming, so a temperance song. But it had its origins in a Protestant hymn and had been recently used by the Hutchinson family singers for their biographical song called The Old Granite State. The song is clearly intended for audience participation, and here, as in the original, it sounds forever by avoiding a final cadence. Something like this. Oh, let me go back to the words there. We have met for a convention and have many things to mention. We have met for a convention and we'll sound it through the land that we're true anti-renters. Yes, we're true anti-renters. That we're true anti-renters and we'll sound it through the land that we're true anti-renters. Yes, we're true anti-renters. That we're true anti-renters and we'll sound it through the land. Soon the anti-rent struggle was transformed from a localized skirmish to a well-organized revolt throughout the eastern part of the state. The consequences were severe, and by the end of 1844, several leaders were in jail. The next 2 years saw an intense outpouring of anti-rent song as Thomas DeVere, now editor of a new weekly called The Albany Freeholder, began soliciting original poetry from readers. 1845 began with New York State establishing a mask law, which made disguises a felony in certain situations. That summer brought the first of 5 settings of Bruce's address to his army, the Robert Burns song I mentioned earlier. Their lyrics attest to the depth of feeling that went into their composition. The tune was associated with Robert Burns' poem, Scots Wha Hae, which recounts the Scots' victory over English domination in the 14th century and their triumph over tyranny. Most poignant of these 5 settings is Haste to Delhi, written in response to the events of August 1845, when an undersheriff's death at the Moses Earl family farm in Delaware County led to the arrests of hundreds of men. So many were jailed that additional buildings were hastily constructed to house them at the county seat, Delhi. 2 anti-renters were condemned to death, and several others received life sentences. While the men awaited their fate, the Albany Freeholder printed these grimly sardonic lyrics by an anonymous writer to the paper, or not anonymous, pseudonymous writer to the paper, Forest Minstrel. Delhi here represents the authorities' absolute power, as it seemed at the time. Oh, sorry. All right. You who seek your country's woe, seek for freedom's overthrow, seek to lay her standard low, haste to Delhi. You who love the feudal law, wish to keep the poor in awe, and their chains more tightly draw, haste to Delhi. But you who would your country save, dare to claim what heaven gave, dare the Inquisition brave, fear not Delhi. Nothing fear, your cause is just, better days will come we trust, tyrants yet will bite the dust in old Delhi. Should I just use this microphone, or should I switch back?
Switch back.
Switch back? Okay. The execution verdicts were commuted to life imprisonment just a week before the fateful date, and the prisoners were eventually pardoned, but only when a new governor, John Young, took office in 1847. These developments put an end to the farmers' physical resistance to land agents and law officers. Instead, the anti-renters focused on swaying public opinion and electoral politics. Several songs encouraged solidarity at the ballot box, such as the one on this broadside, the anti-rent song. Broadsides, many verses, are a mnemonic, the anti-rent, mostly Whig slate. The preferred candidate for each political office is named, from the governor down to Albany County Clerk. Now, it took me a long time to figure out the tune indicated here was itself a political campaign song, the wildly popular Tippecanoe and Tyler Too. This was the Whig song that helped defeat local son President Martin Van Buren in his bid for re-election in 1840. On the broadside, the tune is called Little Pig's Tail. This is why it was challenging. And that was the original song, actually, that Tippecanoe and Tyler Too was based on. So I have a recording of this made by one of my students. Wonderful arrangement.
What has caused the great commotion, motion, motion, our whole state through? It is the ball that's rolling on for the right of soil and a title true, for the right of soil and a title true, and for them we'll go to a man, 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 in spite of manor van, and for them we'll go to a man.
This is a bridge, so we'll go to the end now.
Awake, ye anti-renters, renters, renters, your aim pursue. Let every soul go up to the pole for the right of soil and a title true, for the right of soil and a title true, and for them we'll vote to a man, 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 in spite of manor van, and for them we'll vote to a man.
I will tell Justin you enjoy his song. He's a wonderful young composer, singer-songwriter from Schenectady. He's in graduate school right now in Texas, working on his composition. The anti-renters' impact on politics was confirmed not just with the success of this slate, including John Young for governor, but also with the vote to revise the state constitution. Those revisions put an end to the writing of new feudal leases and limited contracts on agricultural land to 12 years. The anti-rent movement also played an important role in the abolishment of distress, the elimination of quarter sales, and shifting taxation to the landlords, making their situation much less advantageous. Although the Van Rensselaer's perpetual leases were still valid, they were far less lucrative. The family soon sold off its remaining holdings to investors, leading to sporadic conflict among private parties for several decades. The spirit of anti-rentism lived on, but its most urgent chapter was concluded. Now, as these changes were taking place, a satirical song appeared representing the patroon's perspective called The Landlord's Lament. I think you'll recognize this one. Dear, dear, what can the matter be? Dear, dear, what can the matter be? What shall I do with my tenants? How will I get all the rent? The Helderberg boys are playing the Dickens. The night of confusion around me now thickens. Unless this rent business with some of us quickens, we'll all have to live without rent. Dear, dear, what can the matter be? Dear, dear, what can the matter be? What shall I do with my tenants? How will I get all the rent? What I love about this song is its majestic quality, the frivolity of a children's song, originally a comic stage song of the 1790s, juxtaposed with the seriousness of the patroons' grievances, underscoring their fading power and the unsustainable social relations that precipitated the anti-rent movement. One of the many strengths of the old song's show, Down with the Rent, was that it represented people compelled to play for high stakes. And speaking of play, the anti-rent movement can also be understood in terms of tactical performance, the use of theatrical elements for political protest. This is theorized by someone named Bogat. The anti-renters pioneered the use of sociodrama for the purpose of effecting change. The masks, the calico gowns, the tin horns, and the songs had the masked gowns and horns had the immediate practical use of warning and camouflage. But they so tools for staging disruptive actions, such as distress auctions where no one bid, the ritualized seizing and burning of writs, and other acts of living theater. Music was part of the play, providing mood and commentary, rallying spirits, recounting genealogies, taunting antagonists, mourning losses. The songs and sounds of the anti-renters, their allies, onlookers, and even detractors were the aesthetic expressions of one of the great 19th century reform movements. We could do well to listen closely. Whoops. There. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for a few questions, if anybody has any.
So I'm curious of the venue or how these things were played. I mean, we're talking at a time there was no internet, no social networking, stuff like that. There was no Zoom. I'm imagining, did they rent out like the equivalent of Troy Music Hall and charge people to enter? I kind of doubt that. Or was it like in people's living rooms or what?
That's a very good question, and I don't have a good answer. This is a different kind of musical project for me as a musicologist, as a historian, in that this is not a body of music, a repertory in the conventional sense. This is vernacular music that was that responded to a particular situation. I believe it was shared by people, especially those 4th of July celebrations, which dotted the whole region, and I know that that from reading the Albany Freeholder and other newspapers, and so it would say such and such song was sung, or just that a band was there. So it's hard to tell just how widely and in what ways this music was used, and I think you have to almost go piece by piece to come to an understanding of that. Bill Snyder seems to have been very popular and persistent. It's referred to in some newspaper accounts, just like even women standing by the side of the road singing it, taunting land agents, yeah. So that appeared in the Illustrated London News, believe it or not. So word traveled far. But it's just like, as with many vernacular musics, it's hard to know just how it was used. It wasn't a concert repertory the way we might, other studies of music, that's what they're about. Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Dr. Newman, thank you so much for joining us tonight.